Hey, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to an evening of folk horror. This is going to be readings from the forthcoming Dark Heart of the Wood anthology, edited by Dwayne Pesaish. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I am here with Eric Schaller and Rudi Dornemann. Before we say hello and introduce them, we just want to say real briefly, we're sending our best to Sarah Walker, who let us know that she won't be able to make it tonight due to a last-minute conflict. But we're sending our best to Sarah, and we hope to see her again at a reading in the future soon. But we've got some great folklore and folk horror tonight with Eric and Rudi. How are you guys?
Good.
Good. We get the thumbs up. We get the good. We have the try screen, and it's great to see everyone. I'll take a quick look in the comments, saying hi to Carol, hi to Amelia and Chris and Matt, and saying hi to everyone. And you'll have to forgive me. My one of my screens is down, so I'm not going to be very precise in our introductions. But in just a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Schaller, who'll be our first reader tonight. Eric, can you tell everyone out there your biography, or tell everyone briefly a little bit about your work before we jump into the first story?
Sure. So reading a little bit of what I've written, something about myself at some point in the past. My fiction has appeared in such magazines as Nightmare, Black Static, and The Dark. My stories have been reprinted in the year's Best Fantasy and Horror, Fantasy Best of the Year, and the year's Best Weird Fiction. I'm very proud of my relatively recent fiction collection, Meet Me in the Middle of the Air, which was published through Mike Kelly through Undertow Publications. That was in 2016. I will mention something that I'm sort of excited about, which comes from some previous decades ago, which has to do with work doing illustration with Jeff Vandermeer and his sort of collected ambergris group of novels came out this past year as an omnibus edition, but now Subterranean Press is going to be having like a deluxe edition that comes out later this year, I think still. But it's got a lot of my additional illustrations in it, and I did some other illustrations special for that edition, which is going to be absolutely magnificent from what I've seen.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, so I always, not always, but yeah, I sometimes forget you are a talented illustrator as well as a talented author. Thank you so much for introducing it. I apologize. I'm a little bit embarrassed that my tech problem, I'm technically your host, so I should have been doing the introduction. So thanks for helping me out on that. I'm going to turn it over to you, Eric. What's the name of the story that you're going to be reading from?
So this is a story, again, from The Dark Heart of the Woods, as we're looking to do this whole folk horror anthology. This is a fairly short story, just about a couple thousand words, and it's called North of Lake Winnipesaukee.
Okay, over to you, Eric.
Okay. So this opens with a quote from John Adams. The whole continent was one dismal wilderness, the haunt of wolves and bears and more savage men. Listen, it was a beautiful winter's day when Wolfe returned to Tamworth. The snow had been falling for over a week and established a seemingly permanent residence on the cabin roofs and the shit-cobbled track that ran through the settlement. Horse dung freezes just as assuredly as anything else in this winterly world, be it water, food, or flesh. But it was only on this day that the clouds parted to reveal the merciless blue sky, the cold fist of the sun, and the toothed peak of Corraway Mountain. The temperature was so cold. That sounds like the beginning of a joke, but this settlement was well past such jokes, not when the coldest months of the year waltzed arm in arm with death. Sometimes it was so cold that brothers, sisters, any and all family members, regardless of blood, slept huddled beneath the same blanket for warmth. Sometimes sap congealed and pine trees exploded. sometimes your eyelids froze shut. But on this winter's day, the snow thick on the branches of the pines, on this day when the wolf stalked down from the mountain and through the forest to claim its vengeance, it was only so cold the snow seemed effervescent, as if it weighed less than the air and might momentarily rise from the branches, the frozen road, and the pitched roofs, and burst like bubbles from a flute of champagne. Champagne? A myth, really, but a pleasant one. A reminder that somewhere, on another continent once called home, there are kings, queens, and lesser nobility. There are feasts and toasts, oaths and betrothals, betrayals and infidelities. Any such celebration is held all the more dear because a sparkling wine has been imported from a tiny locale in France. This also known as the devil's wine, because the bottles might explode to the touch, their flowery bouquet married to a Chinese firework, like pines in a winter freeze. Here, north of Lake Winnipesaukee, the settlers still remember when the snow stank of volcanic ash and fell throughout a long, cold summer, how the crops shriveled and the livestock died. Here, the crows flock hundreds strong and trade morbid secrets when the cold sets in. On most days, the roosting crows shake the snow from their wings, and the branches follow suit, black replacing white, as if God wrote them into existence across a virgin page. The crows watch, glint-eyed and hungry, from the safety of the trees. But on this day, when the wolf returned, the crows neglected to shiver their wings, and the snow piled on them as if they were beaked statues carved from the wintry boughs, only their eyes sliding, shifting, ever watchful. A wolf pack is a family, united by bonds of blood. The wolf's ancestors noted the first incursions of the Pickwacket Indians, and then later of the frontiersmen. The ground was fertile and well-watered, fish and game plentiful. One frontiersman returned, bringing along 2 Indians, sister and brother, to establish a homestead. They chopped trees, hewed the wood, and cursed the biting flies as they built the first season's log cabin. They cursed all the more when the dread winter cold set in. The Indian brother abandoned the household before the snow melted that following spring, but his sister remained. She endured the annual cycles of cold, heat, and hunger. The frontiersman was once absent for 2 weeks to purchase cornmeal, and his now common-law wife, along with their 3 children, lived on watery milk alone. Once, when starving in the dead of winter, the frontiersman again absent, his wife debated whether to suffocate their children as a final mercy. More years followed, and the wolves watched as others joined the settlement, the forest ever in retreat as the settlers extended their fields for grain and pasture. The frontiersmen fathered 5 children in all. The youngest loved the winter and took to snowshoes as if they were extensions of his feet. Each morning he would tear into a soft pulp of a roasted potato, or if his mother had risen early, a bannock of meal and water baked on a chip of maple wood. He carried a gun. Children of the North learn to shoot as soon as they can walk, and was all the more valued when autumn harvest was past and any meat, be it pigeon or squirrel, was partnered with potatoes in the stew pot. Others might curse the indignities of icy slips and falls, the disgorgements of snow-weighted branches, but he revered the unsettled beauty of the winter landscape. The pines strained heavenward, taller than steeples, and he snowshoed beneath fragrant arches within the true house of the Lord. The wolf family had taken every precaution to hide their den. No tracks marred the snowy hillocks outside their home, but the curious boy stuck his head into their cave and smelled the rot of old meat and bones. He heard the soft breaths of many mingled into one. The boy stole only the one pup, thinking to make it his own, supposing it superior to the dogs with which other hunters scouted for game. The boy returned to the settlement with the wolf pup coddled in his arms, his sleeves in tatters from its milk teeth. The settlers knew only the one version of Little Red Riding Hood, the one in which the wolf gobbles down the foolish girl, and that is the end of it. They do not tell tales of her rescue by woodsmen with his shiny silver axe. They most assuredly do not extend a tale such that Little Red Riding Hood and her grandma kill a second wolf by boiling it alive in a stew pot. Those are tales better served with champagne. The settlers bribed the boy with hard candy to lead them to the wolf den. They then butchered the wolf bitch and her pups, the whole damn lot of them. Had not the Puritans of Massachusetts Bay Colony placed a bounty on wolves as one of their first laws? Had not Roger Williams called wolves a fierce, blood-sucking persecutor? And had not the New Haven settlement once offered £5 to anyone who killed one great black wolf of a more than ordinary bigness? This is not the story of Little Red Riding Hood, whichever version you prefer. This is a story of vengeance. This is the story of the wolf that survived. The wolf that had been out hunting. It was a successful hunt, for he carried a broken squirrel in his jaws, its blood fresh on his tongue. In returning home, he knew to leap from root to root, to never paw the snow. He had warned his kin against the dangers of pride, but he, regardless, took pride in his own acrobatics, to no avail. The den's entrance was crisscrossed with imprints from the rawhide lacings of snowshoes and scarred with drag marks and blood. The hunter's stench of sweat, beer, leather, and gunpowder clung to the rocks and trees, to the tufts of rent fur. That evening, crouched belly to snow, the surviving wolf watched a jubilee in Tamworth village. The colonists built a bonfire so large the flames licked at the stars. They stripped themselves of bonnets and shirts, and, cheeks ruddy, dripping sweat, dared each other to attend ever closer to the inferno. They do-si-doed and promenaded into flickering shadows of the dead wolves. The larger wolves were skinned and hung from a rude scaffold. Slashed, their blood had frozen and bloomed with frost. But now, in the heat, blood adulterated with water trickled from their flesh and burrowed into the snow. The wolf pups, some skinned and some furred, 6 in all, hung from nooses on the grandfather oak. They were curled, heads tucked beneath forearms, as if desirous for sleep. Forearms, not forepaws. The paws of the wolves, young and old alike, had been chopped off and strung on neck thongs, and now bounced and smeared blood on the glistening chests of the jubilating men. What of the boy's wolf pup, the 7th and last of the litter, that which the boy would have taken as a pet and trained to track and take down game? The father told his son that the ungrateful cur had run off. That is what wild things do. They abandon you. He promised his son a real dog the next time they journeyed south. The surviving wolf, however, on returning from the Jubilee, discovered ruptured snow in a shallow grave not far from the village. The snow had been stomped into place and swept with a pine bough. The blood beneath his paws called to him with the voice of his pup, cold, lonely, and lost. It was a beautiful winter's day when the wolf returned to Tamworth to claim his vengeance. Some say no wolf ever passed the door of the meeting house, but a man came out of the forest. He peeled back his cloak of wolf's fur and revealed it still raw on the inside, bloody, a fresh kill, he said, so fresh it seemed almost alive. He passed through the door of the meeting house on the strength of that kill. No wolf passed the door, all who attended meeting that day attested. But whatever emerged from the forest, whoever it was, he stayed in the village for a fortnight, 2 fortnights, accepting their honor and the stranger's privilege. He laughed with the man at each house. They hunted well, he said. He skewered the meat in his bowl with a knife, spooned the gravy, and then wiped his finger along the inside rim and licked it clean with a long pink tongue. The women of the houses said little, not with their men so close, but they noticed the stranger's rich laugh, his strong hands, and his long pink tongue. The stranger stayed only a fortnight or 2 and then returned to the forest. He was a hunter, he said, and would not trespass overly long with the hospitality of the village. No wolf passed through the meeting house door that day, but only 2 months later, all the fertile women of the village gave birth. The women's bellies swelled as if they had dined on tainted meat. They screamed and sweated and cursed their husbands. They offered prayers to the Lord and to Satan, accepting either as savior if only their pain be eased. 2 months is mercifully short, but can seem an eternity for multiple pregnancy. The babies were born helpless and had to be torn from their fetal sacs. This their mothers did by tooth and nail, as if channeling talents acquired from the animal dawn. Their newborns were endearing, none would dispute this, but they were also furred, and they growled at all except their mothers and siblings. No man could have fathered these beasts, certainly not in such number. Triplets were the rule, and one woman even gave birth to septuplets. Litters like what you might find from a dog. Motherly breasts grew sore from the constant squirming attention. Wives feigned deafness when husbands demanded to know the provenance of their brood. The wolf father knew that many mothers would have no choice but to destroy the monstrous meat of their birthing, but some, because a mother cannot help but to love her children, would set their pups free. A wolf pup can run and play within weeks of its birth. These pups would stumble and roll, bat at the drifting snow, and bark at crows. They would roam and they would find their father waiting within the shadowy woods. Some others also, dare anyone dispute this, would follow their pups out through the forbidding snow into those dark woods, there to greet the father and to join his ever-growing pack. Listen. On a cold winter's night in northern New Hampshire, away from the babble of television and radio, away from the roar of trucks on the interstate, you might think you hear wolves howling. More than 8 claws, 8 generations since the time of this tale. The last wolf bounty in New Hampshire was paid out in 1895, and wolves were thought to be eradicated. But wolves have been confirmed again in Maine and in Canada within 20 miles of the New Hampshire border. Listen, the wolves are howling. They call not for you, but for their brethren of the forest. They have forgotten that you were ever family. They are, once upon a time, your sons and daughters gone wild, gone savage into the dismal wilderness they love so well. Dan.
Hello. For those of you who cannot read lips, I just want to say fantastic job. What a great story. It was great to hear that. And before I lip sync a couple of questions over to you, Eric, I just wanted to mention that story is going to be appearing in the book called The Dark Heart of the Wood, which is coming from Oxygen Man Press. It's edited by Dwayne Pasaish, who is here with us. And I just want to I'll put a banner over here. Here's a GoFundMe page where it also acts as the pre-order. So the book is going to be coming next year. If you'd like to pre-order the book, head on over to that GoFundMe page. You could see the full table of contents. You could see the cover, and you could support the book, and you could pre-order it in a couple of ways. But back to the story. What was the inspiration for that story, Eric?
That comes from several points. So a few years back, I had written a story called Red Hood, which was another take on the Red Riding Hood fable folktale. This was published in the online magazine Nightmare, and it was basically a version of the fable as if told in a future zombie-ridden apocalypse. Anyway,
cool.
And it was based, in my mind, there had been some articles which looked at the evolution of the Red Riding Hood fable across different cultures. So I'd become sort of fascinated with that and tried to do something then, again, was this futuristic zombie version. And after writing that, then I was sort of saying, okay, let's go back in time. And I wanted to do something else that sort of played against that, but almost like bookended it. I'm putting my hands closer to the appear on the screen. And so basically, and I'd say really overall, even for the earlier Red Hood, but then even more so for this story, it was really Angela Carter and her short
Wow.
story collection, The Bloody Chamber, which was also inspiration for the movie The Company of Wolves.
Oh,
And
yes.
was really playing a lot with the whole mythos of Red Riding Hood, the sexuality that's undercurrent of that, and all these other things that come into play. And also sort of inverting some of the tropes of the original Red Riding Hood storyline in terms of who are the heroes and who are the villains.
It's a really effective story. There's a line that's already haunting me. I'm probably going to fumble the line, but I think it was, you said it was the monstrous, was it the monstrous meat of the birth?
Yeah.
And what, I mentioned that line. We're calling tonight an evening of folk horror, but as you mentioned, Angela Carter and the Red Riding Hood, all of it falls under the umbrella of folklore. And I wanted to ask you a bit more about your work. How does folklore, if at all, come into play in your general body of stories, Eric?
So I always loved folk tales, and I also consider them much wider variety than the idea of fairy tales again. So again, it's really stories. They don't have to do with the supernatural as such. But again, it's something I grew up with. I mean, Russian fairy tales, Italo Calvino's collection of Italian fairy tales, I mean, Grimm's fairy tales, all these things. But again, not all of them were really fairy tales. A lot of them are really just folk tales that have to do with a culture that's sort of historic to us. And again, but some of the same sort of concerns tend to weigh upon people's minds. And again, you get a bit of the supernatural, which is always appealing to me. And really where I've usually gone, I like to tell stories, I would say, that are like folk tales, but I'm always sort of trying to think of who is telling them. So again, the Red Hood that I mentioned is, to my mind, it'd be like a mother telling her daughter this Red Riding Hood story from the future. Several others I've done, which 3 urban folk tales, which is really a concurrent sort of idea of a set of folk tales that could be told as if we were living a folk tale in our current time. I did a short story called The 3 Familiars, which is about, again, witch child, so to speak. But I saw this really as a witch telling a folk tale about witchiness. So it's always sort of thinking about who's telling the tale, but then removing the teller from the actual storyline, and it's just the tale that they told.
That's super interesting. Everything you're saying is so interesting to me, especially the notions of these folk tales, folklore, folk horror, which maybe at first glance at least I tend to associate with being old or ancient. And I love that you're thinking about them while still maintaining that element. You're thinking about them in futuristic ways. You're thinking about them from points of view, from inversion, from who's the hero, who's the villain. It just takes something so interesting and makes it even more interesting to me. Folklore and folk tales have been a big influence on you. What are some of your favorites, or some of your most notable influences?
Well, I'd say this came back probably when I was a kid. And I don't know where my dad got it, but he gave me an Arthur Machen collected story edition. And wow. Arthur Machen then really hit strongly for me, just particularly his story, The White People, which again is truly folklore. Yeah. I mean, it just completely blew my mind as a kid. And so that was, again, an early inspiration. There's authors nowadays that I truly love. I wouldn't say they trying to specialize in folk horror, but just even thinking about this meeting today, I was thinking of Jeffrey Ford, who's one of my all-time favorite writers. And then one of his recent collections, he had a story called The Night Whiskey, which is truly a Jeff Ford version of folk horror, although people won't necessarily automatically, this is folk horror, but it is. Basically, again, it's a small community. They basically imbibe this whiskey once a year. and it tends to cause strange events to happen. Uh, so it's this
Oh yeah.
ritualistic episode.
Yeah. I'm daring. Do we delve into? Is it completely an academic difference, or is it no difference at all? Notions between what is horror, what isn't, or what is folk horror and what is folklore. In the context of Jeff Ford, I recently interviewed him for Cemetery Dance online, and I was um, I was just aware that Jeff's work doesn't tend to be thought of at first glance as horror, but there really there really are so many horrific. It so easily fits within the genre. While Jeff is in a class by himself and fantastic, fantastical, all of that stuff. There are, even in his most whimsical or most fantastic tales, there are some pretty horrific things that happen, that and they even feel like folk tales. I'm forgetting the name of the story, but it's the one where it felt very dreamlike. But in order to proceed, the protagonist, I believe, had to offer up pieces of his fingers or her fingers to continue on what was otherwise a very whimsical tale. So yeah, shout out to Jeff Ford, um, and thank you so much for that folktale iteration of Red Riding Hood. A quick question for you: did you see the A24 film Lamb as of yet?
I have not.
Okay, well, so we'll just table this question in relation to your story. We'll just put a bookmark there, and after you see
Okay.
Lamb, we'll come back.
Okay.
So get watching. No, another time. But yeah, I definitely making a note to talk to you about Lamb, and uh, just gonna say you wrote this story before seeing the movie Lamb. Let's just say that and leave it at that. So we're going to move on to. So I've got my tech up. Thanks for doing your own introduction. I'll be able to um, continue with my hosting duties. So I'm going to be the next reader for you. Um, I'll introduce myself to people who don't know me. To everyone who knows me, hello. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us for this evening of folk horror. Um, for anyone who might be new, I'm the author of the short story collections, The Night Marchers and Other Strange Tales. It's from Cemetery Dance in 2016. Also, The Wish Mechanics, Stories of the Strange and Fantastic from Independent Legions. The chapbook Yeti, Tiger, Dragon from Din Shores, and the novella The Serpent Shadow, also from Cemetery Dance. My most recent book is Underworld Dreams. It's out from Leve Press. And I have a novel that's going to be coming from Leve Press as well in 2022 or 2023, Servant of the Eighth Wind. I'm the editor of a book called Spirits Unwrapped, and my stories have appeared in publications ranging from Lady Churchill's Rosebud Wristlet to the Best Horror of the Year, Volume 12. I am the host of the Nighttime Logic series and the New York Ghost Story Festival, which you can tune into all those things here at the YouTube channel. I'm really excited to be a part of the Dark Heart of the Wood project. And my story for the book is called Where the Jaguar King Lives in the Dark Heart of the Wood. And it's a very long story, so I'm only going to read a little bit of it for you now. Where the Jaguar King Lives in the Dark Heart of the Wood. Stone Creek District, Belize. Winter 2011. It is said that the Jaguar King lives in the dark heart of the wood, watching over all the cats. The wood's proper name is the Coxcomb Basin Wildlife Preserve and Jaguar Sanctuary, 150 square miles of tropical forest. All 5 of the cat species that dwell in Belize can be found there: jaguar, puma, jaguarundi, margay, and ocelot. Sunset Rick is an American expat. He runs a 2-unit vacation place, Sunset Rick's, in the little beach town not terribly far from Coxcomb. He's at Rosalinda and Enrique Alvarez's farm, which borders the eastern edge of the preserve, picking up his order for the week. The pre-dawn sky is still a glittering carpet of stars, illuminating the clearing where the Alvarez's vegetables are growing. Rick looks to the jungle, a living wall, teeming with layers and overlapping layers of buzzing and clicking that looms over the farm. He walks to his pickup truck, bags of produce and dairy in hand, and scans the shadows and spaces between tree trunks for motion. The guests due into his second cabin, June and Andy from New York, are arriving in the afternoon. The thought of flying, even on one of the puddle jumpers that are the only planes that land on the airstrip, reignites a little flower of unease in his beer gut belly. It has been decades since it has been his job to keep one of those rumbling metal behemoths in the air, circling to and from the fail-safe points, day in, day out, armed with a nuke and extra fuel. And it's been decades since he crashed the little plane he had out here in the jungle, the last time he ever flew at all. He's grateful for the fragrant smell of wet earth and flowers and green and the hint of smoke from someone's trash fire in the damp, almost morning air. A morning doesn't go by that he does not at least think about kissing the ground and small swatch of beach where he's made his home. He doesn't tell guests that the Air Force was where he got the name Sunset Rick. He doesn't tell guests he knows how to fly at all. He does tell them he spends his time drawing and watching for birds and for big cats, if he's lucky. He's always on the lookout. Jaguars are tough, if not near impossible to spot. Most visitors and locals alike will never, ever see one. A shape moves across the Alvarez's field, black on black. Just a shadow, or is something there? He knows the jaguar he calls Cygnus likes to venture out from Coxcomb during the night to rummage in garbage for easy pickings before returning at dawn. Rick holds still and squints, and yes, he sees her right where the green jungle meets the farm. She's there, just inside the line, just inside the boundary of the preserve, where it is illegal to harm her, illegal to shoot any jaguar. She's trotting along openly, brazenly, not concealing herself, as she is so capable of doing, as if she knows the boundary and knows the rules somehow. Maybe she knows he'd never, ever even think about shooting her. Maybe she knows Enrique Alvarez would love to blast her, as would several others who live nearby who do not share his awe and appreciation. These people think twice before shooting, not only to be sure their quarry is outside the border. They know Sunset Rick is not the only one watching. They've heard the stories. The Jaguar King is out there, watching over the cats, protecting them, even avenging them. Rick has been here 20 plus years, one full year before Coxcomb was founded, and while he has his notions, he can't say for sure if all of the stories are true. He's also never seen a jaguarundi, yet he knows that doesn't mean these most reclusive of the cats are not real. Cygnus halts, turns her head, and looks Rick's way. She can smell him. Knew he was present long before he had any hint of her. Rick wonders if she's contemplating the Jaguar King too. A raucous toucan call, the first sign of day, punctuates the nighttime cacophony. The jaguar bounds off, her spots and sleek feline contour becoming one with the tangle and brush as she flees the coming morning for places where daylight cannot reach. June and Andy watch as the little Cessna they and their luggage deplaned from just a minute ago reaches speed and lifts into the air at the point where the dirt strip of a runway ends at the Caribbean Sea. Sunset Rick is watching them from the shade of a rusty tin roof held up by four poles at the corners that is this airport. He swings open a hinged section of the rusted remains of something that once upon a time was a barrier and says, "Welcome." And he doesn't like the way the old expat looks June up and down as she's hunting for her smokes, but he's used to it. She's in a t-shirt with Duran Duran's Rio album cover on it, half tucked into a pair of black denim cutoffs. Bruises from iron deficiency, in various stages of fading, mar her pale legs. Her short shock of hair that was once punk during the days when she purchased the t-shirt remains short for now for efficiency, not style. Endless hours in the shop and time with her niece, and every iota of sleep is what counts. Though she feels she cleans up nice on the date nights Andy every so often persuades her into. She lights up a clove cigarette, a real one. Contraband Andy provides for her somehow, even though it has been years since Obama banned them. Andy doesn't want her to smoke, yet he keeps her flush with them because her money is tight and he knows how much she loves them. She takes a big pull, inhales like her life depends upon it, then realizes the men have already loaded the luggage. The three of them fit easily in front of the truck, in the front of the truck. The windows are down. Belize's heat is palpably real. The November snow and all the crushing minutia they've left behind is a ghost, unable to dwell in it. "First time here, you two?" Sunset Rick asks. "I come to Belize a lot," Andy says. "Well, used to. Back before I met June. I never made it this far down. Always wanted to. I told myself one day, I'd come back with the woman I love." "Good old love and romance, I remember that," Rick says. "I remember it too," Andy says. "This one protested, but she's here, we made it." June smacks Andy's tattooed bicep. "I run a business and have a daughter," she says. "All I need right now is to be eaten by a jaguar or get some tropical disease." Rick reaches down with one hand, his other never leaving the wheel, and produces a can of beer. He glances at Andy and June to see if they will dare to voice disapproval. "Yeah, we do have jaguars," he says. "Scarce on diseases, though. Plenty of beer. Want one?" "Can I smoke instead?" June asks. "Sure." He swigs his beer just as they hit a patch of bumps. The road is an unpaved swath cutting through untouched jungle on both sides, broken up only by the infrequent clearing or sign indicating the presence of one of the few area businesses. A paved road is on the way. Supposedly someday it's really going to come, along with cops and rules. Well, real rules. For now, we're still free here. For now. There's no AC in the cabins. You'll want to get the ceiling fans going, and it's perfect, June says. Rick sees her face light up as she takes Andy's hand. "It's absolutely perfect here. I see what you mean," she says. "You were right. I can see myself staying here forever." Andy is painfully aware she didn't say us. A small thing considering all sign of the nicotine-starved, sleep-deprived, uptight, worried bundle of nerves he spent the long day of travel with comforting has disappeared into the tropical heat and sun. "Why the change of tune, sweetheart?" Rick asks. Andy braces for June to blast him for the patriarchal endearment. But no, there's only that faraway look on her face. The one she wears when she's in the place she goes, when in the grip of her lowest lows, the place he could never reach her. "There's a jaguar," June says, "nearby." "What?" Andy asks. "I can feel her. I see her spot. She's almost all black. You can just make them out. You see her when she moves. Then she's gone into the jungle like, oh, I don't know how to say it. We have to find her. I have to see her. Andy and Rick exchange an inquiring stare, each expecting the other to offer an explanation. I guess this means we're going after all, Andy says. I knew there was a reason I loved you. I'm down for going right fucking now. Easy, cowboys, Rick says. You don't have to go far to see a jaguar. We've got one right around here. Exactly like the one you described. Damn if I know how you did that. Hell, you damn near picture perfect described the jaguar I call Cygnus. She comes out of the preserve every night. Why they get a taste for our garbage is beyond me. Andy's always wanted to go. That's why he planned this whole trip to take me. You heard the lady. Is there anywhere around here we can rent a car, June asks? Or maybe do you think we can use your truck? You're my guest. After you lovebirds settle in, I'll do my best to be of service. Rick knows the Jaguar King doesn't like outsiders. He wonders what he's going to think of these weekend warrior hipster has-been wannabes. Stupid question. He knows the Jaguar King doesn't care for humans at all. So I'm going to cut it there. Bring our other readers back in. So that was just a little start of where the Jaguar King lives in the dark part of the woods. And I'm going to turn the banner on. That's coming from Oxygen Man Press, edited by Dwayne Pesaish. If you'd like to pre-order the book or just have a look at the table of contents, there's the link scrolling over there. The inspiration for that story, wow, what are inspirations? I was thinking about folklore in terms of, how do I say this? Not real folklore, like in terms of like, well, a lot of folklore is something that's out there, and we're writing stories about it. But what, like, could we make it like? Can we make up fake folklore about a place, or not fake, just make it up? And as I'm saying this, one of my favorite, it's a god awful movie. I can't believe I'm even mentioning it, but it's from the 70s or early 80s. It's called The Bogans or The Boogans. Have either of you two seen this movie?
I've heard of it.
No.
I will not admit I've seen it.
Yeah.
Don't, you know what? Don't rush
Only
out and see it. But it's a miserable movie. But one of the things that and I guess it's like, one of those folklore movies, like, yeah, they say never go into the mine, or don't open the mine, like, one of those stories, like something will happen. And I was watching the Blu-ray of it, and it was done by a B movie production company that oddly enough didn't do horror movies, and the writer director and the production people had since become longtime friends. So when the movie finally came out on Blu-ray, they're talking to each other and they're asking each other, well, how did you come up with this? He's like, well, you were doing so good, and there was money coming around. You said you wanted a horror movie, so I just lied to you. I pretended that this was folklore. And I was writing a story. I made it up. So I guess it's interesting. It's just a funny story, and a B movie horror story. But I guess it reminds me of something that one of my favorite authors, Tim Powers, says about a writer's job, or particularly a writer of supernatural, is in short, it has to feel real. I think the anecdote that Tim mentioned to a convention once was he talked about a place where they raise chickens for slaughter, and these generations and generations of chickens had never seen the sun. They were all born and raised generations and generations in the inside of these things. And some people were doing an experiment. They took a silhouette of a hawk or a chicken hawk, and they ran it across on a zip line across the top of the warehouse or the enclosure, and of course, all the chickens. It inspired panic. So I think Tim's point is that even is to inspire that feeling, even if some of these things they're imaginary that we've never seen before. Just as these chickens had never, there was something in them that responded to the silhouette of that fake hawk. They'd never seen a hawk. They'd never even known any chicken that could somehow tell them to see a hawk. But it's whether the folklore, whether the horror, or any story is real or not. I think it's our job as writers, and hopefully it does that for us as readers to inspire that fear. So I think there are a lot of great stories like that are going to be coming in the dark heart of the wood. We'll move on to our next reader, and I have my technology. I think I have my technology back with us, so I'll be able to introduce to you Rudi Dornemann. Rudi Dornemann lives in forest-adjacent, frequently fog-shrouded Portland, Maine, and his short fiction has appeared in such places as Strange Horizons, Realms of Fantasy, and the anthology Spirits Unwrapped. He's instigated and contributed to the Flash fiction website, The Daily Cabal. His latest project is a new fiction podcast email series called Notes from an Imaginary Place, which you can find and subscribe to at his website, rudidornemann.com. Rudi, what's the name of the story that you're going to be reading from tonight?
The one I've got that's going to be in Dark Heart of the Woods is called Walker's Wood.
Okay, here's Rudi Dornemann reading Walker's Wood. Take it away, Rudi.
Okay. Walker's Wood. You walk hours and hours across fields and meadows before you go in among the trees. You could stick to the fields. The afternoon is warm, the walking pleasant. Birds with red beaks are building a nest on the shoulders of a scarecrow. Buzz of crickets, peppery smell of pollen, blue sky and only the faint, fleeting shadows of clouds. The fields are safe. They're overgrown now. You can see a few scraggly grain stalks among the wildflowers, holdovers of whatever crop was here once. Rye, some older kind of wheat. A few minutes ago, you passed the foundation of a long disappeared barn. Any other day, you'd explore a bit, see if you can find some old border walls or a covered well. But you have a place you need to be and a time that you need to be there. As you cross from sunlight into leaf shade, you're careful to shuffle your feet. If there are fairies in this wood, and if they're divided into two warring factions, one on the right, one on the left, then you haven't offended either of them because your first step into their territory wasn't made with the foot that represents their enemies. You move further into the woods. You begin to walk with normal steps and do not find yourself pierced with thousands of arrows like slivers of light from either the right side or the left. There is a path where you expected one to be, and dry leaves crunch underfoot. An explosion of wings in the bushes just ahead. Grouse. You see it for a split second where the light comes through the trees. Panic in its all black eyes as it watches you, as it rises into the shadows. Your heartbeat settles back down. The path splits, and you know to follow the fork to the right. You've studied for this day. You've prepared. Located obscure books in the sub-basement storage areas of certain libraries. Met dozens of charlatans. Followed link after link online from one site full of half-baked mysticism and full-on conspiracies to another, picking up a handful of useful clues along the way. You've spent a rainy Saturday afternoon in an unsettlingly empty coffee shop off the motorway with someone who might not entirely be a fraud and isn't generous with whatever information they do have. You finally found the handwritten notes kept by the people who collected the lore that went into those obscure books, so you could learn the things they've chosen not to print. You're ready. A clearing, a low rise, and then down a ravine, steadying yourself on the small trees as you descend, using their exposed roots for footholds. In the stream at the bottom, a deer carcass. Still a bit of flesh on the ribs, some fur on one of the forelegs. You're glad you brought your own water. The skull is a little way uphill on the other side, completely clean. You avoid its gaze. Work your way along the stream. Look for where the path resumes. There are paw prints in the mud. Have wolves come back around here? Is it just dogs? There's some research you haven't done. When you find the path, you have to climb over 3 down trees on your way up the slope. At the top, you sprinkle a bit of ash behind you. Strangler fig leaves burnt with ginkgo bark and ground to powder. That should turn back the deer's spirit from following you. You come out into a clearing that's barely larger than the size of your own apartment back in the city. The sunlight is suddenly warm. You consider tying your coat around your waist, but know it will be cool again as soon as you reach the other side. Grasshoppers flick into deeper grass at your approach. Heavy smell of lavender, although you don't see any. Ahead of you, the wind rattles leaves at the tree line. Then another stronger gust lifts the leaves into the air and keeps spiraling up into a dust devil. You wait for it to dissipate. It doesn't. It moves towards you. You step to the side. It follows. A wind bride has found you. It's maybe a meter taller than you and moving steadily closer. In the whirling, you see dry leaves, twigs, bits of bark, the bones of mice, the teeth of something larger, someone perhaps who'd come to the woods before you and wasn't as well prepared. You have gloves in your pocket. You put them on, roll down your sleeves. In the center of the wind bride is a heart that doesn't turn. A lump, pebbles and a bit of shell glued together with clayey mud, and a clump of hair sticking out. You reach in, grab the heart. Even though it's the still point in the whirlwind, you can feel it trying to turn. The wind shakes the trees around the clearing like a storm is coming up, then pulls in tight around you. You close your eyes against the dust and hold your breath. You're in the center of the whirlwind. You grip the heart more tightly, making sure it can't get loose. At the center of that mudshell pebble heart, you know there's a single seed, the last grain left on the last stalk in whatever autumn created that wind bride. With your teeth, you pull the glove from your other hand and press your thumb against the wind bride's heart. You feel your thumb sink in, and as it marks the mud with its own whirl, its own spiraling, everything the wind has held falls to the ground around you. Pebbles, acorns, owl pellets, a molar with a silver filling. You step over the debris of the wind bride and look at the lump. This could be a useful thing in the right situation to the right person. You put it in a bag, zip the seal shut, and put the bag in your coat pocket. You're wearing this coat mostly because it has so many pockets and you have so many things you needed to bring with you. You'll have to miss the heart every few days to keep it from drying up and crumbling apart if you want to get anything for it, either online or from your motorway coffee shop informant. This trip has already been worth the preparation. Any other day, you'd head back and hike home. You look at the map, more for reassurance than because you've forgotten anything, step back on the path and follow it into the trees. More than once, it leads you through a wall of brambles. You pause after the second to reapply bug spray, particularly around your feet and pant cuffs. It would be ironic to ward off all manner of curses and other metaphysical dangers, only to come down with Lyme disease. You continue and reach a stand of dead trees, pale, naked trunks on either side of you, like what you see when salt water leaches inland, although here you're miles and miles from the sea. You wait until a cloud covers the sun before you enter, and go still every time the sun breaks through. In full light, there are dancers, movement and flashes of color in your peripheral vision. You know what not to do. Do not join the dancing. Do not hum the music that you can't quite hear. To the best of your ability, do not let any other tune run through your mind. Do not so much as tap your fingertips on your thighs in time to the beat which seems to be in time to the pulse you can feel at the back of your neck. A long sunny stretch, and you don't dare get out your sunblock, even though you can feel your face reddening. When the mist forms drift across your path, you let your eyes blur, even though their faces seem like they might be those of people you know, people you haven't seen in many years and won't ever see again. You do not block them in their swaying, nor join in their twirling. You count your breaths. You begin to worry that all the forecasts were wrong, and you'll have to wait for nightfall to be You begin to worry that all the forecasts were wrong, and you'll have to wait for nightfall to be free of blue skies. When the clouds finally free you, you half jog through the rest of the dead forest back into the living. And it's all deeper green, and you can almost feel the leaves exhaling coolness all over you. You check the time, the right hour, and it's the right day. You steady yourself a moment, put your hands in your pockets, check with your fingertips that everything is where you can grab it. Vials of powder, spiky but fragile talismans, charms on pieces of paper folded into shapes of roses, crows, frogs. You're ready. You cough a couple times to be sure your voice will be there when you need it, and you walk forward. A skull hangs between two trees, the branches on either side grown around its wide-reaching horns. An oryx, extinct here for 1,000 years. Rags and long strands of moss hang down from the horns. The old stories you found say this is how the fairies speak in a way that humans can hear. You see a swarm of something inside, a churning cloud like dark and glittering bees. You hear their voice as they shout in unison to be heard, and the ancient skull buzzes in resonance. Not, it says, not welcome. It takes them time to build themselves up to sentences. You are not. What had been cool is clammy now, and the air smells like a stagnant pond. You wait. Do you have something for us? Says the voice. Do you want something from us? You listen for any hidden voices, any dissent or crosstalk, but the fairies seem united. I brought you pretty stones, rare spices, and flowers turned to sugar crystals, you say. You pull things from your pockets and spread them out on the ground under the skull. I would like to ask if you could, your voice cracks, if I could understand more about this place and all the things that are here. If we give you this knowledge, you will come back, says the voice. You may tell others. You may tell in written symbols that last for years, and the symbols will keep telling the knowledge even after you're dead. The voice was starting to break up, and you could hear undertones of other partially spoken syllables behind the main speaking. I will not share what I learned with anyone, you say. I will always come alone. The swarm in the skull goes still. You don't know if this means anything. I will always bring gifts, you say. I promise. The swarming resumes. The gifts you have brought us are good. I can bring more. You catch yourself and avoid saying that you could bring better. They might be offended if you imply that you haven't brought them the best this time. The voice sounds like waves on the shore, like static between stations, full of mutterings and half words that you can't make out and might not be in your language, might not be in any language, not any human language anyway. We will, it says. The static roars, then drops to a conversational level, as if you're just two people chatting. We will give you what you ask. We will accept what you have offered. You agree, first with a nod of your head, then with a stammered yes. Thank you. Certainly. You can't believe it was this easy, that they didn't ask for something more difficult. The movement inside the skull turns less dark and more glittering, and then something comes at you too fast to see, and it feels like you've been stung in both your tear ducts. Your eyes are all pain, and you clench them shut. They throb and seem to shrivel in your head. You crouch over. Look, says a quiet but sharp voice that seems to be inside your ear canals. Now. You force your eyes open. You're above the forest. You can see the places you've been, places you avoided, things you hadn't known were there. You see the forest as it is and also as the fairies know it to be. You try to commit it all to memory. You see your path as a spiral, a labyrinth trail, even though most of it seemed to be close to a straight line when you were walking it. You keep seeing more that you try to remember until your eyes begin to water and the view wavers and a shiver sweeps through you. Then you're back down on the ground, or back to seeing through your own eyes again. When the flight or the vision or whatever you've experienced is finished, you see that you're in a different place, far from the oryx skull. You know you're maybe 5 minutes from the edge of the woods, and you stumble in that direction. You rest against the trunk of one of the larger trees. After so much planning, it's a relief to be doing. You'll get a good price for that wind-bride heart, but you have to admit, at least to yourself, that this excursion has been as much about the challenge, the satisfaction of surviving through your own cleverness. There's a little glow at the base of your sternum that might be pride. Is this what those authors whose notes you read felt, standing under this or a similar tree a century or 3 ago? Did your motorway informant feel this at some point in the slightly less distant past, in the days before they gained the habit of pocketing all the coffee stirrers? A little further, and you look out on open country. You look back, deeper into the trees, trying to tie this place to the wider view you've seen. There's no trail here, but you realize that this is where you entered the woods earlier, although some things have changed. There's a road through the middle of the field right now, and houses you don't recognize on the other side. It's evening, and the houses are lit from within with warm orange light. You want to find out what's happened and how much time has passed. You try to take a step into the grass, but when your foot comes down, you've spun around and are headed back into the woods. You turn and try again to step into the meadow. You spin again. You try again. This time, just turning toward the field winds up spinning you all the way around so that you're facing the forest. You start to turn once more toward the field and spin again, faster this time. You just think of turning and you spin, a glimpse of the field blurring by. You hadn't noticed, but there's a bit of mud on the tip of your thumb. You rub it against your fingertip, wipe it on the leg of your trousers. It's still there. This trace of the wind bride is working to turn you into a wind bride as well. You know what to do, however. You bite down on your thumb hard. It tastes like vinegar, swallowed tears, and decayed leaves. With saliva on one side and blood on the other, the cap of mud loosens and falls from your fingertip. The mud forms itself into a tiny person and runs back into the woods, where you know it will grow with the seasons until it has become your double. Then it will follow you out of the woods, tracing footsteps you will have long forgotten. It will move at an easy walking pace, as if it's out for a restful hike in quiet country. But it won't rest, won't stop. It will catch up with you eventually. And when it does, it will turn your feet at the ankles, turn your legs at the knees, and again at the hips. Turn each and every vertebra with a little twist, all the way up to your skull, which will wind up looking behind you. The instructions that you read, that you so carefully memorized and used as checklists for all the things you carried with you, have misled you. You'd read about mud doubles and how nothing could keep them from tracking you down, but you never saw anything telling you that they'd be formed as a result of stopping a wind bride, or that the reason they couldn't be kept away was that they're animated by your own blood. Your only hope is to double back, find the thing, dry it in a fire, crumble it to dust, and feed it to one of its whirlwind kin. It's nearly night, however, and the forest is a different place in the dark, with different dangers, too. Ones you haven't studied, ones you have no responses for in any of your pockets. You can still taste the sourness of the mud. More lights come on in the houses. You could run after the little mud double. It's probably already starting to look like you. If you hurry, you might be able to catch it while it's still small enough you can overpower it. If you can find it, small and fast in the declining light. Or you could go back to the oryx skull. You know a shortcut now, and the fairies are sure to know a way to deal with your double. However, you've given away all the gifts you brought, and without gifts, all you can offer are promises. Knowing your desperation, the fairies are sure to ask for you to promise them something very challenging. Or you can walk back out into the world, return to your books and your motorway service area informants. How many years will you have? Will they be enough for you to figure out a solution? How fast do mud doubles grow? How fast can you read? What are the chances that anyone's figured out how to stop a double? What are the chances that they wrote it down and in a place where you'll be able to find it? In the end, how clever are you? All your choices are bad ones. Night is falling fast. Something's rustling in the undergrowth. You should really make up your mind. Whew. Thank you.
Oh, well done. Well done. Please tell us that mud doubles are something from your imagination and not real.
Yes. I'm pretty sure, unless I've forgotten where I saw those, that I had made those up.
That's such fantastic elements, the wind brides and mud doubles. Love it. Really, really well done. What was the inspiration? Where does this stuff come from? What was the inspiration for this story, Rudy?
Well, let's see. I was kind of thinking of the idea of folklore and the idea of kind of the secret, sort of obscure knowledge of all the little things of how things work. I wasn't thinking at first of anything specific. Although I guess a few years ago I did see something on the old Anglo-Saxon traditions around elf shot, and I forgot exactly how you ward it off, so I kind of fudged that bit. But and then kind of in parallel with starting to jot down some ideas for the story, I was like, folklore. I'll look at my copy of the Golden Bough, and I'll look over here, and I happened to come across. I'd already been thinking a little bit about like a little dust devil sort of whirlwind. And I found an article online about the tradition in Europe of, like in Germany, I think they call it the Rogan wolf, the rye wolf. And there's a whole class of like these beings that come around from the last bit of grain that you harvest each year when you harvest a field, and that you have to do certain things to sort of propitiate this spirit, and that it's kind of a hungry spirit. And one of the variants of it turned out to be a thing that was actually called a windwife, and I was like, I found it. So that then that kind of gave me that. But I've always liked the stories where, and it isn't just in a fantasy context, but any kind of story where you've got a character who is kind of finding their agency, finding traction in their world, learning how to do things to make other things happen. And I think there's that kind of sense of competence that's kind of interesting to watch with a character. And it's also interesting to watch that get flipped on them and undermined, and see the spy get double crossed, or the detective find out that they were working all along for the murderer, and or anything like that. So so that kind of set me on the sort of cool knowledge, but maybe a little bit of hubris there kind of thing.
That's one of the things what you mentioned I like so much about your work, when you said a character finding that agency and then seeing it sort of go on its head, because this story in particular, and your work, it has that sort of I guess I call it the garden path. Like it has a lull. Like this character felt like he was in control, and as people in the comments are pointing out, there's so many cool, magical or wonderful or fantastical details, but there's always that lurking sense of danger in this story and in your work. And one of the things I loved, a detail I picked up on when I was listening to it, was when you said suddenly that, at first that little mud double seemed, oh, okay, we could deal with this. It's just a little guy, but then it's going to come back and it's going to grow, and it's not going to replace you. It's going to turn you backwards, just like that detail of just how it was going to turn your ankles and then your bones and then your spine and then your skull. I'm like, that, it really, just that little hairline detail just turned it, it put it into the realm of horror for this listener for sure. Rudy, you're a storyteller in addition to being an author. How does storytelling, if at all, come into play with your experiences with folktales and folklore?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, my wife's the real storyteller in the family, and we have a lot of friends who are, genuine storytellers, and have done it professionally and things, and I mean, I've learned a lot from them, and it's been really interesting to, primarily being somebody who works on paper, to see how they elaborate their stories, and how they spin them out, live orally, and how that kind of changes things but doesn't change some underlying stuff. And some of them work with folklore materials and stuff, so it's been interesting to see how some of them will weave that into what they do. So I don't know, I think I'm a little more storyteller adjacent. I've gotten a little chance here and there. A couple of times I've gotten up and told a story. And there was a thing actually a few years ago where my wife and I got to do this sort of storyteller exchange thing with a village in China, and everybody who went had to tell a story. So I dusted off a cool little short bit of the Arabian Nights to tell for that, so I could have a little bit of storyteller cred. But I mean, so it was Arabian Nights by way of Borges, so it was all kind of complicated and doubles and twisting. But
very, very cool. How about you said you work, obviously you said, and we as writers, we work on paper. How does your work, if at all, intersect with folklore and folktales in your writing? I know you're working your project that we mentioned, Tales from an Imaginary Place. Tales from Imaginary Places is your latest project.
Yeah, and that one, I think I've got a little bit of a split personality where, sometimes I'm like delving into some research to do something, and then I might be pulling from folklore, from history or whatever, and then I'm doing stuff that's a little bit more totally coming out of my head. which is where I think I'm going mostly with the stuff that's going into the newsletter / podcast. But I think it probably is a little bit influenced by having, um, dug back a few times in other stories, into some folklore or some history or that kind of mix between the two. So that, now when I'm pretty much everything I do is secondary world. And I think that sort of weave of what you know to be true, what you think might be true, what you don't know and didn't expect, and how quickly the characters start to get into maybe the reader sort of discovers the context of the world, and maybe the characters are discovering um, more about the context than they'd even know, more about how their world works around them. So
Yeah,
it's kind of an indirect answer, but yeah.
No, it's a fascinating answer. I'm not sure how many of them you've put up yet, you've posted or put out there. I've read a couple of them. I love the way you characterize it, because it does dovetail with the folklore in that it's fascinating because you're creating these secondary worlds, and it's great how it's like so you have a secondary world that is with its own set of rules and reality, and there's the ones that I've read, they have their own lore, and they're just as intricately and interestingly detailed as what we heard tonight. And it's amazing how they interplay with the setting, and they interplay with the agency of the characters, picking up on the two things that you were saying. So I'm looking forward to seeing the whole series, and um, definitely recommend to readers to check that out.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. I'm hoping people will either catch the podcast as it comes out or subscribe to the newsletter. It's going to be monthly for 2 years to get through all the stuff I've got drafted right now. So, um, a little bit of a
so
slow drip, but
where can they tune into that? We're going to wrap it up soon, but we'll just go through our authors here. We'll let everyone know where we can connect with them and connect with the book. So, Rudi, where can they tune in to learn more about you and more about Tales from an Imaginary Place?
you could go to my website, rudidornemann.com. There's definitely a sign up form there for the newsletter and information about the podcast. Or, at this point, you should be able to find the first episode is out. So it should be present in all the usual podcast places as Notes from an Imaginary Place, which I tried to research, and I don't think anybody else has used that name. So it should be mine if it's the one.
It has a cool Calvino sounding feel to it, which I like as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm such a big Calvino's fan that it had to creep through. So.
Well, thanks so much for that wonderful reading. Eric, where can people catch up with you and more of your work?
So I mentioned beginning of the program, yes. So I have with Jeff Vandermeer's Ambergris Omnibus edition coming up from Subterranean Press, which is like a deluxe sold out edition now, but there's a bunch of new artwork in that. Is probably the main thing coming out soon that at least I know of. And again, the short story collection, Meet Me in the Middle of Air, came out a few years back, which can still be picked up in various locations.
Do you have a website that you want to direct people to for all things Eric Schaller?
Not really. With my friend Mancini, we still have our Revelator magazine website up. Although we haven't really put any new issues out for a while, but everything up there is still a premium quality, as the Revelator magazine is known for. And a number of fine authors have published stuff up there.
Great. So you can check out get Eric's collection wherever you buy books, and check out his project, The Revelator, online. You could check out my work at bloodandstardust.com. My most recent is Underworld Dreams. And before we go, we'll just put up the banner one more time. all the stories you've heard tonight. Again, just because someone was mentioning it in the comments as we mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, the other reader that was going to be with us tonight was Sarah Walker. So we hope to catch up with her again, catch up with her another time. Hopefully, we can all do this again, and we'll be talking more about this book when it gets near to publication. Again, it's The Dark Heart of the Wood from Oxygen Man Press, edited by Dwayne Pasaish. And you can support the book now at the GoFundMe that we're scrolling here. And you can surf on over there to read the table of contents and see what other great stories are going to be coming from a variety of great authors. I'm really looking forward to reading it. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Rudi. Thank you to Eric. Thank you to Sarah. Thank you to Dwayne and all our friends here in the comments. I'm just reading a couple. I see Matt and Ken and Una and Matthew Cheney's there and Ross here and Amelia. Thanks to everyone for coming. And thanks for spending this time listening to and talking about folklore and folk horror with us. Have a great night and be well, everyone.